continues to have a long shelf life. In high school, I read Mere Christianity as one of my first theological books at which I tried my hand, and my copy still has clumsy margin notes and excessive underlining stimulated by issues he raised and thoughts that were still brand new to me. Then I went off to college and became a philosophy major, and as typical of both the time of life and the discipline, I thought I should give up childish things and entertain adults-only thought. But I had a professor in graduate school named Paul Homer who wrote a book on Lewis, and in it he says, Lewis's literature shows us something without quite arguing it. Lewis would have it that literature actually creates thoughts in us. It's not only about thoughts, it causes them to exist. It gives us experiences and feelings, moral pangs, wishes, and hopes that we have never had. And at the same time, I was reading the Chronicles of Narnia to my children, and I found the stories were giving them experiences and feelings and hopes. So I began to think that those who dismiss Lewis were thinking of the wrong things. What should we be looking for? The details of Lewis's life can be briefly surveyed. He was born in 1898 in Belfast. He arrived in the trenches of the front lines at World War I on his 19th birthday and was wounded. And due to a pact he made with his friend that if either of them died in the war, the survivor would take care of their families, Lewis came to care for Janie King Moore for 30 years in a house they famously lived in called the Kilns. Lewis's teaching career was unevenly split between Oxford, 29 years as a tutor in English language, and literature, and Cambridge, the final 9 years of his life. Only in the last 7 years of his life did he enter into a romance that had a profound impact on him, marrying an American named Joy Davidman. She had cancer, but after an unexpected reprieve, they had 4 years together in true married love until her death in 1961. And Lewis died in 1963, a week before his 65th birthday. That's what a life looks like on the outside, quickly summarized. What about on the inside? Lewis wrote about himself in an autobiography, and he records his main reason for objecting to God. No word in my vocabulary expressed deeper hatred than the word interference, but Christianity placed at the center what then seemed to me a transcendental interferer. Lewis had to overcome that, and he did so by 2 personality traits and 2 friends, all 4 of which led to his conversion. The first was his desire to be rigorously logical. He studied with a Professor William Kirkpatrick and said if ever a man came near to being a purely logical entity, that man was Kirk. Some boys might not like it. To me, it was red beef and strong beer. Whatever would be the door through which Lewis would enter faith, there would not be a door that left reason behind. Second was Lewis's love for mythology. All the great myths had attracted him, and he said, I came far nearer to feeling worship and awe about the Norse gods whom I disbelieved in than I had ever done about the true God while I believed. The 2 friends who helped him in his conversion were Chesterton and Tolkien. With one he became a fast friend, the other he never met, but was greatly influenced. The question was no longer to find the one simply true religion among 1,000 religions simply false. It was where has religion grown to true maturity? Where, if anywhere, have the things of paganism been fulfilled? Where was the thing full grown? Everlasting Man, the book by Chesterton, was helping me here. And the former, whom he did meet, and with whom he remained fast friends all his life, was Tolkien. Here was someone who understood the love of words and love of myth and the power of fairy tales. The magic of fairy is not an end in itself. Its virtue is in its operations. Among these are satisfaction of certain primordial human desires. What are those desires for Lewis? He and Tolkien and Dyson went on a walk down Addison's Lane, and they showed me that if I met the idea of sacrifice in a pagan story, I didn't mind it at all. I liked very much the idea of God sacrificing himself to himself, provided that I met it anywhere except in the Gospels. Now I came, Lewis says, to believe that the story of Christ is a true myth. It's a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with the tremendous difference that it really happened. At any rate, I'm certain that this Christian story is to be approached as I approach other myths, and it's the most important and full of meaning, and I am nearly sure that it happened. This study of Lewis is concerned with two things. First, the lure to God that was stimulated by an awakened desire that Lewis himself called romanticism. And second, how Lewis tries to awaken this desire in the readers of the Chronicles of Narnia. Romance is a kind of longing, but a special kind of longing. It is insatiable. And in Mere Christianity, Lewis describes it this way. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove that the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. Could Lewis arouse this in others? He admits that he did not write the Chronicles as a religious allegory to teach us something. Teaching religion like that had turned him off when he was a child. He wanted to create a certain element of desire. I thought I saw how stories of this kind could steal past a certain inhibition which had paralyzed much of my own religion in childhood. But supposing that by casting all these things into an imaginary world, stripping them of their stained glass and Sunday school associations, one could make them for the first time appear in their real potency. Could one not thus steal past those watchful dragons? I thought I could. What did Lewis sneak in past those watchful dragons? What did Lewis find in Narnia? What is the desire he tries to awaken? What sense of God does Lewis try to show us? It would take many, many books to answer that. Perhaps I'll write another someday, but for now I focus on one. Beaver is describing Aslan for the first time to the children. They mistakenly think that he's a man. They'll feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. That you will, dearie, and make no mistake. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or else just silly. And he isn't safe, said Lucy. Safe? Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. Putting these two together was a concept of the numinous that attracted Lewis. He's telling us that Aslan is wild, that this is an element of fairy. He's trying to communicate the numinous. And I will try in this book to look in each of the Chronicles in order to see this element, because the final goal of Chronicles of Narnia is that the children who met Aslan there could meet Christ here. Are you in our world too? Said Edmund. I am, said Aslan, but there I have another name, and you must learn to know me by that name. This was the reason why you were brought to Narnia, that by knowing me here for a little, you may know me better there.